Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Love Fruit podcast. We have here another fantastic, legendary guest, for the first time we've ever interviewed him, and that's Dr. Gabriel Cousens. And Dr. Cousens is an American physician, a homeopath, a spiritual writer and teacher, a yogi, and a Native American sun dancer. He has spoken in over 42 countries about the benefits of the lifestyle that he advocates, a live food, vegan way of life. He is the founder of the Essene Order of Light, a spiritual organization based upon teachings from the Jewish Kabbalah, the Torah, and modern interpretations of the Essenes. He founded the Tree of Life Center in 1993 in Arizona as a health retreat and raw food rejuvenation center. And he has over 100 prevention of diabetes programs promoting a vegan way of life around the world. And his commitment is to bring this message of live foods and a vegan diet to as many nations as possible around the world. And he's spoken in over 42 countries, as I mentioned before. So, Dr. Cousens, is there anything else you'd like to add to that illustrious list of achievements before we get going?
Well, really, I'm really here to serve, and my main focus right now is bringing that message to the world, spiritual message and live food vegan message. That's really what I'm doing. I'm putting it out on Facebook about 5 days a week, and that's my commitment for the next 20 years or so.
That's fantastic.
I didn't start with live foods initially as a philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
In 1973, when my wife was pregnant with our second baby, we had this nightmare. We both had the same nightmare, that the fetus was a chicken and we were eating the fetus.
Oh my God.
In one day, we became vegan. So that's a strange way to make a transition, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then over the next period of time, I lived in India on and off for 7 years in an ashram, okay, and travel. I slowly moved. Well, let put it this way: I received what we call Shakti Pat from Swami Muktananda, 1975. And when I went into nothing, I came out and a little voice said, you need to learn to eat and live in a way that supports the Kundalini energy, which is the transformative energetic power that we have in the yogic system.
Mm-hmm.
And that got me going. You learn to eat, okay? Pretty important. So I began saying, what is the best diet for spiritual life? So between 75 and 83, when I became 99% vegan, 100% vegan, 99% live food. That's since 1983. I kind of got clear that the optimum diet for spiritual life that best turned us into a superconductor of the divine was a live food vegan diet. That's how I arrived at it. I didn't arrive at it from other philosophical reasons. It was initially from a spiritual point of view. So that's not the usually way you go about it, but that's kind of the key. Now, I don't want to get too much into the subtle anatomy, but there's a reason why I came to this conclusion, besides it works. I mean, you got to start with practical, is that we have a subtle anatomy called the nadis. There's 72,000 of them. The three main ones, Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. Now, the point I'm saying is meat, fish, chicken, dairy, and eggs clog the flow of the spiritual energy in the subtle nervous system. And I saw that when people stop doing that, there's a much greater flow of the Kundalini energy. So that was honestly where I was coming from. And, since then, I can explain, well, sure, live food makes you really healthy. When I was 20, captain of an undefeated American football team, okay?
Mhm.
I could do 70 push-ups and 7 pull-ups, which was better than anyone else could do. So at the age of 60, now that's being on a live food diet for, 30 years, I was able to do 601 push-ups
Whoa.
and 100 pull-ups.
What? That's a
And
lot.
yeah, but the point I'm making is what's very clear. Okay, so my age now, my chronological age is 77, okay,
Mhm.
roughly speaking. And so I'm up to 500 push-ups every few days and 80 pull-ups, so and I'm way more flexible. When I was 20, I couldn't cross my legs. I was so tight, and I couldn't touch the floor, right? Now
Yeah.
I can put my palms on the floor and sit cross-legged for a few hours. What happened? So besides doing the yoga, which I do 6 days a week, being on the live food vegan diet, I became more flexible and more strong. So with age, this is the kind of important message here. With age, we can become stronger and more flexible and have more energy and endurance. So what we're seeing is, wow, we're not reversing age. We're just living healthier, stronger, and more flexible than when we're even younger. So we can improve with age if we're on this kind of diet. So that's kind of a really important message, because people have all these myths about,
Yeah.
you're going to go vegan, you're going to waste away, or live food, even worse. That just simply, if you're doing it right, is not the problem. Is not a problem, doesn't really happen.
Yeah.
That's going to take me to one other point I want to make, and that is doing it right. So under my supervision, I really get about a 99% success rate putting people on the live food vegan diet. Now, how come? What am I doing? People are unique individuals. We have 20 to 30,000 genes, maybe 200,000 gene variations. And we even have a chromosome 19, that says how much protein, carbohydrate, and fat you should have in your diet. And the key is eating according to your genetics.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I'm not going to go into that whole discussion unless you want to go there, but how to individualize your diet. We're unique beings. We aren't cows. We don't just need grass. So there's a mix, and the research kind of suggests 70% need a higher protein. I'll explain that in a minute. And 30% need a lower protein. So no, what are we talking about? So the research out there says there's a thing called the mTOR pathway, capital T, capital O-R pathway. And it basically says for optimal longevity, optimal anti-cancer, we want to be between 35 and 70 grams. In the meat eating world, 70 grams is still quite low.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying here?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's still a relatively low protein diet. And that's an important little piece to kind of understand. So people who are really low, and I'm a person that doesn't eat much protein. And I'll tell you a story about that in a second, but I'm about 10% protein by diet. Other people maybe need 15 to 20%, still not that much. But we can easily get it out of live food vegan diet. It's just not a problem.
Sure. And
now when you cook your food, you're going to lose 50% of the protein. You coagulate it, 60 to 70% of the vitamins and minerals, and 95% of the phytonutrients. So obviously, going raw, you can eat half as much, literally, and get full nutrition. Mm-hmm. So people can easily get the full nutrition, and at the same, on raw, and you don't have to eat as much. So all that kind of goes together. So I'm going to say one more thing. the protein you need varies a little bit with age. So men, the researchers on men in their mid-40s will have excess protein, which is not really going to happen with vegans. We get adequate protein. We get double the amount of protein we generally need. Okay, so not a problem. But if you have too much, you're doubling your rate of mortality and quadrupling your rate of cancer. Okay, but that changes with age. So at 65, I noted that the research shows that we need slightly more protein. At that point, I was doing about 8% protein, and I was around 25 pull-ups, and I was feeling a little stuck. So I said, okay, let me make one change. I took 1 heaping tablespoon of blue-green algae, E3 live a day, and that's where I went up to my 100 pull-ups, just by adding that little bit of protein. So these things aren't big, massive type things. Easy to get with the vegan live food diet, but there still requires some thoughtful little adjustments can make a big difference. So that's kind of a teaching message for people.
Yeah, that's great. That's excellent. And the thing that I'm most interested in with there, Dr. Cousens, is there's a lot of different reasons that people come into the raw live foods lifestyle, and vegan lifestyle. And many people come in because of health issues, and some because of the ethical animal rights side. But you're an example of someone that's come, it seems the first initial interest was actually to do with the connection between diet and spirituality. So I'm guessing what you're saying is you weren't actually particularly sick at that point. You weren't desperate to change your lifestyle for any particular reason, but
that's completely correct.
Because of this spiritual path you were on, and that's similar. I resonate with that quite a lot as well, because I felt that as well when I kind of transitioned to this kind of lifestyle. And one thing I wanted to ask, just obviously you got that voice and that clear message to change, to learn how to eat, to go towards raw foods. There seems to be a lot of spiritual teachers and gurus and leaders over the years who haven't made those changes to their diet. What do you think the difference is there?
Well, it's an interesting question. And one of the things is in all the great traditions but one, it really is either lacto, vegetarian, or vegan. Mm-hmm. Okay. You go back to Gan Eden, it was a live food diet.
Right.
Okay, it's not that complicated. It was very straightforward. So the great traditions, as they say, except one, basically teach what I just said.
Yeah. And
all I've done is kind of gone back to it by my own experimentation. Okay, so one of the things I teach, I can call it the way of holistic liberation. So what am I saying? A lot of the teachers, for a variety of reasons, are only looking at your state of consciousness, but they're not seeing the whole thing. Mm-hmm. They're not seeing the diet. Well, how's the diet? So if you go vegan, what are you saying? Well, you're not killing animals. You're not creating cruelty. If people were, the world were vegan, we could feed the world 7 times over. If it were live food, we could feed 12 times over. It's like, wow. No famine, no, okay. Environment, huge. Going vegan is a huge impact on the water and the air, okay, and the quality of earth and how much earth we use. Cattle use a huge amount of earth, vegans 5%. So one vegan, depending on the statistics, 16 vegans can live on the same amount of land that a meat eater can live on.
Yeah.
So we have the environment, we have the water, we have the clean air. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, the reason I say that is something went off. Okay, we have really feeding the hungry. Mm-hmm. Like, what do we have today? Estimates are 44,000 kids starved to death each day, not each year. 15 million. It's like, that can all go away. I do a lot of work in Africa. I'm working in at least 6 different countries in Africa, and then Mexico, Brazil, different places. So feeding the people is pretty important. So if you kind of see the big picture, and you see that we're all one with the living planet, which is an environmental message, obviously. Mm-hmm. We're one with the planet. Going live with a vegan has the least amount of negative ecological input, impact on the planet. So we preserve the ecology of the planet, we preserve human life, we feed the hungry. There's another, obviously we begin, you got more healthy because we know that meat eaters have 32%, I'll say it another way. If you go vegan, you have 32% less heart attacks, depending on the type of cancer, 2.3 times less colon cancer, 4 times more ovarian cancer of eating eggs. It goes on and on and on. But the point I'm making is it's not very healthy. Mm-hmm. And we also know that vegan live food, but the data is for vegan because live food is more minority, is that men live about 7.2 years longer and women live 4.4 years longer. Mm-hmm. So the data for longevity, health, well-being is a big deal. Now I'm going to share one more thing. It's called fertility. The research shows that 95 to 96% of the pesticides, herbicides, anti-sperm, anti-ovarian stuff is in animal fat. So when we lower on the food chain, what happens? We're going to become more fertile. So I'm not joking when I say if the way we're going, live food vegans will be the ones who will be reproducing. The amount of fertility is really decreased. And so actually, I'm not joking because the lower we are in the food chain, the better it is. For example, when they put kids just on organic. So I want to say, I'm talking about live food, organic, vegan, which a lot of live fooders are anyway. What we know is you put kids on organic and they have 1/4 to 1/6 the amount of pesticides and herbicides in their blood within a short time. A vegan mother who's breastfeeding has only 1 to 2% of the toxins in her breast milk as a meat-eating mother. So these are huge implications. That's why they have the fertility. So I'm just adding, like a bigger picture. Now, a lot of people in the spiritual world, answering your question, are saying it's all about the mind and the body doesn't count. But my approach to holistic liberation, which is what I'm talking about, is everything matters. The heavens and earth aren't separate. So the mind is not separate from the body. What happens in the mind affects the body. What happens in the body affects the mind. So that's kind of the difference in perception between a holistic approach to liberation and just kind of a mental approach.
I mean,
that's what we're talking about.
And you've got an interesting, you were a physician, I believe. Was it psychiatry that you did at one point?
Yes.
And was that before the live foods and the spiritual awakening, or was that something? What was when did that come into your life?
It was actually before, and here's how it evolved. So I graduated from my 3-year psychiatry residency in 1973. But I went into kind of more general practice. How did that happen? Well, I saw that the state of the mind is affected by the state of the body. If your blood sugars are off, if you're eating junk food, it affects your consciousness. Yeah. Junk food diet creates a junk food consciousness. Sure. Okay. And I wasn't taught that in medical school. That was like way far out to say something. Yeah. So I began to see the connection between mind and body and mind. Now, at those times, not much was being said about it. So it was like my own personal discovery. So when I saw those two, then I kind of said, well, fine. I'm not even going to see people for psychotherapy unless I can get their bodies healed. And then many, many, many mental things cleared up. A lot of depression is from poor diet. A lot of anxiety, for sure, is from poor diet.
Right.
So that's how I got into hypoglycemia, how I eventually developed a natural live food, and live food is a big part of that. Live food, vegan treatment program for diabetes, healing diabetes in 3 weeks. And what I mean by 61% of the non-insulin dependent diabetics heal in 3 weeks, and 24% of insulin dependent heal in 3 weeks, with 86% are off all insulin in 3 weeks. So that's pretty fast. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's better statistics than the other studies that have been out, which is at 5 years. So there's a vegan study that shows you decrease your medication need by 40%. Fine. Our decrease is actually big picture, 97% are off all medication in 3 weeks, not 5 years. So live food is hugely important. It's dramatically more effective for healing diabetes, 3 weeks versus 40% less medication in 5 years than just the vegan diet. So that's very notable. So I kind of want to point that out.
Yeah, that's
important.
And so how did you transition away from that career? Because obviously a lot of people would think that's a pretty good stable career and everything, being a medical doctor or psychiatrist. And I guess you transitioned towards doing your own thing really, and having your own center and everything. But were you just not able to do what you wanted to do in that?
No, not at all. I'm
Right.
still doing it. It just, we have different cycles in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of cut down my practice, my private practice, enough to just support a little bit. Since 2007, I developed these programs all over the world because I said, well, that's fine. Let's bring it to the world.
I see.
And so it's a humanitarian kind of outreach. That's kind of part of I've been doing humanitarian work since 1965. I mean, I worked with black gangs in the south side of Chicago, lived in Central Harlem for 3 years, did all kinds of work to uplift things. So
Yeah.
I've been doing this. So it's just part of what I do. But I actually am still open to see a few people for holistic healing. I see people all from 128 different nations. Just came back from Brazil where all but one person healed their diabetes in just a 2-week program. And the other person went from 280, which is very high low blood sugar, down to 140. So, I'm still doing it. I'm just doing it in a more concentrated way.
Yeah.
So I've trained people to take over some of this. But personally, I'm doing everything, but I'm expanding in the more public vegan, live food, and spiritual teachings.
Excellent. And when you were getting into the live foods and everything, we'll go back to the start of that. And at that point, who were the people that you were learning from? Or was this something that you had to learn on your own? Or did you have teachers? Did you have books to follow? What was the journey like for you?
It was a great question. Basically, I'm a researcher. I got to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in India. I'm not part of the Ann Wigmore type thing.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I can see what works. I can see what doesn't work. And I have a few thousand people in the ashram I'm taking care of because we're kind of a traveling ashram. And it got kind of clear what really worked. Okay, so that's kind of how I learned. Later, I'm going to say later after I wrote my first book, Spiritual Nutrition Rainbow Diet, in '86, I began kind of meeting people. I did see when I was finally back in the United States in 1983, I met a few live food people who came to me, and I also saw, just again, as a clinician, a lot of people are out of balance. What's the problem here? So I have an Ayurvedic background. I'm a diplomat in Ayurveda as well. And what I saw is people were too much on leafy greens. So from an Ayurvedic point of view, we have Kapha, Pitta, Vata. I'm just generalizing for a second. So the live food diet that was going on was a highly Vata disorganizing diet. Too much prana, not enough Pitta, and not enough what we call Kapha, or grounding energy. So, okay, what's wrong? You just can't do this on leafy greens. That's why traditional Ayurveda will say, no, can't do live foods. Well, because they're thinking live foods are sprouts and leafy greens. So what I added to the story, that's why there's a high success rate, is I saw people needed more protein in the diet. That's easy. Nuts, and they needed more fat. Nuts and seeds are fantastic. Then we have spirulina, chlorella, blue-green algae. There is no problem getting enough protein, but if you're not doing it, there's a problem.
Yeah.
So I began, this is what we call the kapha. Kapha is kind of water and, let's say, mud, water and earth. So people on the going thing with Ann Wigmer was air, spacey, air.
Yeah.
So when I added that, then it's like, I need to write about this, because people in the live food movement in general were way focused on just having your vata aggravating things, which are good, you get a good high, you move the prana, but you're not grounded. And they also were too alkaline. I had a system where I could measure the blood, urine, and saliva. And so I could measure what was happening on long-term high leafy green sprout diet. People became too alkaline. And when you get too alkaline, you also get spacey and ungrounded. So as we added the blue-green algae and the spirulina, chlorella, and the nuts and seeds, people got more grounded, and it also brought them back to optimum acid-base balance. So in the blood, which hard to measure, optimum is 7.46, slightly alkaline. Okay, 7 is neutral. And your urine pH should be between 6.4 and 7.2. So I even saw it myself. I mean, if I fast, my urine, which I do twice a year, my urine pH would go up to 8. I get a little spasms and little different things. Fine. I have 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, and I bring my urine pH, which is an easy measure of our body pH, first year in the morning, 6.4 to 7.0. That's where I began bringing people to. And that's the concept. So 2 problems: the vata derangement on the traditional leafy green sprout primarily, and excess alkalinity. So when I addressed both of those problems, let's bring this to balance, okay? There's non-variations of the kapha, pitta, vata thing, but let's just bring it to balance so everything is in order. They're called doshas. That was 1, but 2, let's get your pH in order here. So when I solved those 2, and I realized, well, that's an issue. As I began, again, seeing clients, because there weren't that many live food doctors at that time. So people began coming to me. Then I said, well, I need to write my first book. I need to start talking about this. Yeah. Does that kind of make sense? What I
that does. It does make a lot of sense. So where, and I guess just to fill in for a lot of people, obviously, Ann Wigmore, that style was to do with sprouts and greens, green juices and things like that. And that's kind of been followed on by the Hippocrates style of things that's still there now, the Hippocrates Health
Yeah,
Center?
I'm pretty good friends with Brian Clements,
Sure.
and who runs Hippocrates. And he's kind of moved toward, he and I are in agreement. I'll just put, basically, of all the different people in the live food movement, vegan movement, he and I are very aligned. Because he's kind of moved that way. So he's teaching this more balance. You got to have a certain amount of protein, got to have, you know, there's more balance. So we're really aligned because they have shifted away from that.
So what for you is your ideal kind of live food diet on a day-to-day basis, and has that changed over the years at all?
The ideal is, again, well, what I teach people, because not everybody's ready to go to 99 to 100% live food. I enjoy it, okay? I'm like a spiritual athlete. I'm going to do whatever is going to get me to where I want to be.
Yeah, yeah.
But the truth is, I really enjoy live foods.
Sure, sure.
Okay, so it's not a discipline for me.
Yeah.
My wife Shanti, she's from New Zealand. She was a vegan, teaching veganism when she was 18. You know, this is our way of life.
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of get that. It is part of my life, so it's not a struggle. However, when you're starting out, I say at least get to 80% live, 100% vegan. So first, let's get the vegan, okay? That's a big jump for a lot of people, okay? For me, it was one day, but that was an extreme nightmare, right? Mm-hmm. And then maybe it'll take you a year to get to live foods, but try to get to 80%. So what my observation is, how do clients do? You know, how is it once they get to 80%, it may take 2 years to get all the benefits of live food.
Yeah, yeah.
Versus go to 100%, in 3 months, you're in a very high-powered state. So it may take longer, but I'd rather give something people can do that they can sustain and be successful. If I say you got to be 100%, it's like, who's going to do that? But once they reach 80%, then they can start moving. So my initial goal, where I see it really works over a long period of time, is 100% vegan, 80% live food. Obviously, organic as much as possible. I like 99% organic.
And for someone like yourself that's closer to 100% or 100% live food, do you eat 3 meals a day, or how do you eat, and what would your meals sort of consist of?
Well, that's an interesting question. So in the evolution, and not on purpose, but in the evolution of things, a lot of what I did is just observing me. Mm-hmm. I don't go with theories of how it should be, because I'm a researcher. Mm-hmm. Everybody makes things up. So I actually have 1 meal a day. Now, let me qualify that so it's clear. So I usually eat between 12 and 2 p.m. This is 10 to 2 p.m. is what we call the pitta time of the day. Mm-hmm. Best digestion, best fire digestion. That's when I have my big meal, which is basically salad and nuts and seeds. Okay, and try to make some kind of interesting entree as well. Okay, in the morning, I have soaked goji berries. Mm-hmm. And just like a touch of tahini to make it taste good. You know, I love goji berries, but to make it taste good. Goji berries are one of the top longevity herbs, in the top 8 longevity herbs. So that's just, overview. I'm not going to talk about longevity herbs right now unless you want me to. And then for dinner, I try to be hydrated. So I'm going to have a juice or some kind of soup. That's it.
Nice, nice.
So I don't eat much. It evolved that way.
Yeah, yeah.
The way I look at it is play with your diet. You need to be as strong as you were eating 3 meals a day on 1 meal a day. Your energy has to be as strong. You have to be good energy all day long. I don't get tired. I don't take naps. I just go. And I'm working probably 12 hours a day, probably more. I actually have to stop for a second.
Okay, no problem.
Okay.
Okay, so that's pretty clear on what you're eating on a day-to-day basis. You also wanted to add in, I believe, you take some other things as well on top of that?
Yeah, I take some supplements. In my books, I've concluded that most everybody needs B12. Now, there are a few people who don't immediately need B12. But after 5 years, I'm going to estimate, well, let's wait, 40% of meat eaters are B12 deficient.
30%, 30?
40%.
40%.
But that's not an accurate figure because that's at the minimum, which is like 200 nanograms.
Right.
That's minimum. If you go to 400 or 450 nanograms, which people think is optimal, of human active B12, not analog, I'm going to estimate about 80% of meat eaters are B12 deficient. Well, that's a pretty high percentage. Yes, are vegans going to be B12? Maybe they're 80, 90%. So the truth is everyone's B12 deficient. You take your risks, okay?
Sure.
There are physiological variations. Some people from their colon are able to absorb, this is where we're making human active B12s in their colon, are able to absorb more. There's a pathway that brings it back to the small intestine. There are genetic variations. But 80% of meat eaters at the optimum B12 are deficient. So I'm saying everybody needs B12. And meat eaters actually have a lot more deficiencies in general. But I want to make it clear that vegans and live fooders are less deficient than meat eaters. Because everybody asks the other question, where do you get your B12? Well, if you're a meat eater, where do you get your B12? Okay, so I recommend everybody do that. Most people I see in today, and maybe it's because of the stress in the world, the environmental stress, the emotional stress, we burn up a lot of Bs. So I see a lot of people, because I'm checking people on all this all the time, be low in B3, B6 as well. I generally recommend people use what I call food concentrates. No synthetic, just raw organic food concentrates. There's a few companies that do that. And they ask also, the B12, the human active B12 is a particular bacteria. And some of these companies have cultures of that and they add it in. So you're getting human active B12. So I recommend, and obviously it'll be low potency because when it's real, you don't need as much. Okay, if you're getting 50 or 100 of this and that, that's for sure synthetic. It doesn't work the same. The same with vitamin C. Humans don't make vitamin C. So I use a food concentrated vitamin C. So these are all kind of things we carry in an online store, Dr. Cousens online store, and people can get here. But those are some of the basics. And then according to whatever else, I use a lot of different herbs. Okay. The other thing is a lot of people, particularly in England, are going to be deficient in vitamin D. And they say, oh, you need 400 IUs. That's not true. You need a minimum of 2,000 to 10,000, depending on the person, to get blood levels of around 80 to 90 versus the minimum of 30. Vitamin D is really important for brain function, for immune function, for protection of cancer. It makes everything kind of work right. So those are kind of some considerations. So I do take a little supplements to kind of, cover that potential, but they're all what we call food concentrates. No synthetics, much lower potencies. So I actually do recommend that. That's what I see. I haven't seen one person in 47 years I've been doing it who doesn't have some deficiency.
Right.
Yeah, and mineral deficiencies are a thing too. Again, less so with vegans. Why? Well, because vegans get a lot of vitamin C for iron, for example, and it helps bring iron into the system. So actually, this may sound outrageous, but vegans may be less iron deficient than meat eaters because they have a better way to pull it in. So that's how I do it. And then herbs for healing, endocrine functions, stuff for diabetes. But diet, the life food diet's the main healing agent.
Yeah, fantastic. And your journey to the way you eat now, was the transition difficult, or did you find it relatively easy to transition to a live food lifestyle, or did it take many years, or what was your kind of experience with that?
I would call it really easy. I tend to go for two reasons. How does it make me feel? I'm going to go to whatever makes me feel good. Good means strong, energetic, active, flexible. That's all part of feeling good. Energy all day long, mind clear. And I'm going to eat whatever does that. And live food diet, live food vegan diet, it does what does it. So as I discovered it, I got more and more that way. So that's kind of how that went for me. It varied. It was really partly living in India, partly traveling. It was I'm going to say it was an immediate process, but given the right setting, harder to be live food in India. But the minute I got back to the United States, it was like immediate. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, excellent. What are some of the kind of mistakes you've seen people make? Because obviously not everyone is able to stick to this kind of lifestyle, and what have been some of the problems or the challenges, the mistakes you think people make on a live food kind of diet?
The biggest mistake, I think, is going too fast. And then rebelling.
Right.
So I just say, okay, get vegan first. Don't worry about live food. Go vegan first.
Right.
Oh, now you're vegan. Great. You're stable with that. Okay, now let's start increasing your amount of live food. Make it to 50%. Great. Maybe it'll take you a month or two. Find your recipes. Find what you're doing. Okay? And then get at least to 80%. Stable. Feel happy. Feel how good. Give it a few months. Then you can progress. So I kind of protect people that way. I think that's the biggest thing is don't get idealistic and try to go too fast. Listen to your body. Trial and error. Are you in full energy? You're not doing it right. Okay, so I do a lot with feedback. Hey, if you aren't full energy, if you aren't clear all day long, you're missing something. Go back, figure it out, and then proceed. That way, success one step at a time is what really works. That's pretty much that, and you have to figure out whether you're a person that needs your 70 grams versus 35 grams of protein. That's pretty important. You have to individualize your diet. Those are the two things that I am very clear bring success.
Fantastic. Now I want to talk about the Essenes and the Essene, based organization that you started and everything. And I've learned a little bit. I've seen a little bit about the Essene Gospel of Peace and different things like that. And obviously you know a lot about these things. Could you tell us a little bit about that, about what that is, the spiritual beliefs, how that ties into veganism and everything else?
Well, the Essenes, and I think it's important for everybody to understand, they weren't just unified. The Essenes probably started about 500 BC. It's said that Pythagoras, who was the great vegan, okay, before the word vegan came and with Watson in 1944,
Sure.
from England, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Before that, people were called Pythagoreans.
Right.
So the story, historically, the best I can get, and I can't tell you that's accurate, but the best I can get, is that he came from Greece, trained with the Essenes on Mount Carmel. So we have a note of them, 500 BC.
Right.
And came down as a live food vegan. Okay, so
yeah.
So we have that kind of understanding. Now he was pretty intense. Now they didn't have juicers, so you couldn't even follow Pythagoras unless you did a 40-day water fast. So he was one of the great teachers there, but he learned from the Essenes. So the Essenes were all over the Middle East, and I've been at most of the sites. So we have Lake Mareotis in Egypt. I have not been to Damascus, but they went as far as Damascus, where we have a spiritual fasting retreat. We've been doing it near the Dead Sea, near Qumran, which is like an Essene training center.
Well, the Dead Sea Scrolls area.
Yeah, that's right. We're like 10 minutes from there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but they were all over the Middle East. That's the key thing I want to say. They weren't just in Qumran. Okay, and probably at the height of the Essene movement, maybe 5,000 people, which is, so they were, pretty intense, pretty focused. We can make an argument that John the Baptist and Jesus were Essenes. And his brother also, it said James, the brother James, in his book about him, or the books about him, but he had bread, but only had bread and just had herbs and drank water. So that's inner circle Essene. Mm-hmm. So what we can say, there's an inner circle that was 100% live food and vegan. And they were more the spiritual teachers and leaders, and their belief is really what we've been sharing here. This, they didn't use these words, but this helps you become a superconductor of the divine. That's what they're essentially saying. And then there was another circle outside of that, do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. That added dairy. Okay? And so we can say the inner circle was 100% live food vegan, and then they had the dairy, which was live food then, but they had a little bit more cooked food, and those are really the two big shifts. So you can't really call yourself an Essene according to the practices if you aren't in that realm.
Right, I see.
Okay, dietarily. The Essenes were focused on God, obviously, and they did a lot of intense practices. It was all around that. So they divide their day, 4 hours of service work. A lot of them were healers, and that was part of what they did in the larger community. A lot were farmers. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so they did that. They had 4 hours of study and prayer, meditation, and 4 hours of eating food, socialization, education, that type of thing. So that's what they did. They did have families. We can say that Jesus and John actually came not from Qumran, but they actually came near the Sea of Galilee. And I've been there, okay?
Right.
And right above that is the Sermon on the Mount.
Right.
I've been there.
Oh,
Okay,
wow.
because it was right there. So I've been to actually, and I've also taken, when Jesus went in the River Jordan, there's a particular, well, what we believe is, it's right there. It could be, it's right around, you go past the Dead Sea and you're at the Jordan, 10 minutes from where we do it. So I've taken what he did, what we call mikvah, or a ceremonial bath in that. People can go there now. They have to wear these gowns and things. I would just go to the side because you're not supposed to have any clothes on. It's supposed to be like the baby in the womb. So I would kind of go off to the side without clothes and do that.
Sure.
But so that's kind of the Essene lifestyle. It's the fast track focus, intense focus on God in that way. Their focus was studying the Torah. And the word Essene can also be translated from Hebrew as doers of the Torah.
Right.
So that's kind of that. And so it's a more committed way of life.
I see.
And we were doing Essene gatherings and things because I'm reaching more out to the world. I'm not having as much time to organize that. So we just have Essene support groups. If people want to link into that, just go to drcousens.com and say, well, I want to be part of the Essene kind of group.
And you also obviously run the Tree of Life Center. And what do you do there, and what happens there, and how can people learn more about that?
So we made a transition because I couldn't do everything. Right now I'm just finishing a spiritual autobiography. It's about 500 pages called Into the Nothing, which is, or Dissolving into the Nothing, which is more meditative, but it's a lot of teachings, but it's my own spiritual autobiography. All that takes time, and then I'm traveling all the time. So I had to make a decision. Well, we live in cycles. So after 25 years, I've actually cut down a lot of the centers so people can't stay here residentially.
Right.
So where I'm talking from right now is where our office is. We have 2 acres. We're completely off the grid, completely solar. Our well is solar. Okay, everything is solar. I'm talking to you on solar energy right now. So, we're doing that. We're looking at, and people come and they can stay locally and they can still do spiritual fasting, individualized spiritual fasting. People can come even for individual diabetes programs. People come for whole person healings. I do have twice a year that I'm doing here. I'm doing things in Brazil and Israel, different places. But here I'm doing 2 3-day intensives, meditation intensives, and 1 0 point. And the next one actually is March 19th. And we're meditating 3 hours a day. I've been given from 2 what we call the power to awaken the Kundalini. The power of Shaktipat was given to me by Swami Muktananda when he acknowledged me, as a awakened yogi. But also in the Torah tradition. Okay, so we give Shaktipat, it helps awaken the Kundalini, and almost everybody gets awakened when they come. So it's 3 days of that, and then 4 days of what we call 0 point, which is a process of working with your mind. It's a Western version of what we call it Jnana Yoga, which is yoga of the mind. And it shows you how to delete the thought forms of the mind that block you from liberation. So that immediately follows the 3-day intensive, so people can be here for that week. And then in the fall, I offer again the 3-day intensive. That's all I'm really doing here at this point, because I'm just I just got back from Brazil, teaching for 21 days, trying to bring it to the world. So I had to cut down what I'm doing here. When I'm here, we do individual spiritual fasts. People can do diabetes programs, get whole person healings, that kind of thing.
Excellent. So, and if people want to learn more about you and what you're doing, would drcousens.com, is that the place to go to learn more about it?
That's the place to go. We made it real simple. We have obviously a mailing list. People want to be on that. I've just done a lot of work on the whole coronavirus 19, and I've come up just briefly. Everybody's going to be exposed. That's not the problem. The problem is are you going to be healthy enough to not be affected by it?
Right.
So I have a whole protocol that I put out in my newsletter. I'm not putting it on the internet because they make that kind of hard, but on my newsletter. So if people want to sign up to the newsletter, just go to drcousens.com and it will lead you where it goes. And that's where I'm doing more private information because of all the censorship that's going on. You are aware of what I'm saying, right?
Sure, yeah.
Internet censorship. So, but how do we reach people and give them how do you protect yourself? You can. And my feeling is most everybody's going to be exposed, fine. Don't worry about it. Just do things that really protect you from getting it. So we have things that have been proven to work in the past with coronavirus, what we say, weaponized coronavirus like SARS and MERS. And they worked with them, and mostly I'm pretty sure they're going to work with this. Hopefully, we will be tested, if you understand what I'm saying. So all that's available. Just sign up for the newsletter. People want to do a part of Essene kind of monthly conferences. It's fine. They just, again, can get directed to the right thing.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Cousens, for joining us today. And for everyone that's listening, thank you for joining us. And if you like this episode, this interview, then please feel free to share it with anyone else you think might be interested in hearing from it. And if you want to comment or give us feedback, please feel free to do that. And you can also, if you're on iTunes, I believe that you can rate the podcast as well. We'd like that as well to help us reach more people. But thank you very much, Dr. Cousens, for joining us today. Have you got any last message for the audience?
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank you for your good work. It's really important we get this message out. England was like one of the great vegan starting points.
Sure.
Historically. And I just want to honor the people in England of doing that and making the next step to the live food. I am willing, if with proper arrangements, to come and speak. I do some speaking in Europe, and
sure.
So that's the first thing. The second thing I want to encourage people is that, as I kind of hinted, the live food vegans, adding the spiritual component can really become a powerful light to the world where there's so much confusion and chaos. And so I bless everybody that we're inspired to be that light to the world with a total holistic lifestyle that can lead us to a holistic liberation. Blessings to everyone.
Excellent.